Good morning, everybody. Well, thank you, Bruce, Tony, and David, for setting the scene so effectively. Having covered the war in Bosnia, having been in Lesbos, Germany, other places where large numbers of refugees are arriving, I know, and I think we all know, that you don't become a refugee because you have a choice. You become a refugee because you no longer have a choice. You don't put your children in a rubber dinghy on the high seas because you have an alternative. You do it because the alternative is to die. We know that, but the large numbers of refugees arriving have also provoked a strong political reaction. There's a lot of unease, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of suspicion, and that has translated into forms of identity politics and bigotry that are throwing up barriers in Europe and the United States to refugees. And on the front line of this are local actors, are cities, and people working in cities, in schools, in local communities. And that's what we want to try to get at on this panel. And I'm joined here by the Honorable Annise Parker, 3 times Mayor of Houston. She was at the forefront of the remarkable achievement of Houston at the time of the Katrina disaster in settling very rapidly a very large number of people who had lost their homes. Next to her, Kutaiba Idelbi, from Damascus, twice arrested, tortured, and been here in the United States a little over 3 years, and he's the co-founder of People Demand Change. Next to him, Arndt Burkhoff, the co-founder of Hanseatic Help, and he's been on the front line in Hamburg. And finally, Philip Appel, the manager, Corporate Partnerships and Foundations, Save the Children, Germany, who has been very active in Berlin. And Arndt, if I may, I'm going to start with you. So what's been going on in Hamburg? Obviously, people who see a large number of refugees arriving, who see large numbers of children from foreign countries arriving in their schools, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of fear, and we've seen that Chancellor Merkel has been paying a price. What's it like working on the front line? What are the main issues you confront, and what are the main lessons learned for you up to this point?
I think one of the main issues was in last fall, and it's still we still have to deal with the consequences from it, is that we were not prepared very well as a city, I would say, and that's why we had on several days coming more than 500 up to 1,000 people per day to the city of Hamburg, and for the immediate response, it was just really, really difficult to put up shelters in the first place and to provide the people with basic stuff like food, clothes, and other things of daily need. And the good thing that came out of this was a very spontaneous cooperation between the city government, between civic society, between established social organizations, but new organizations that basically started in a second and formed initiatives like ours did. We gathered at a exhibition hall in Hamburg, where in the next neighboring hall there were 1,200 refugees placed in as an immediate shelter, and we just started collecting stuff, started collecting clothes that people brought.
So how quickly did you put this organization together?
Over a weekend, basically.
A weekend.
And then I think it grew during just a span of maybe 3 or 4 weeks. We managed to fill this 30,000 feet exhibition hall with donations in kind, with I think 5,000 or 6,000 euro pallets full of clothes and other stuff. So just in the initial stages, initial weeks, we decided to not just to supply the 1,200 refugees in the neighboring hall, but basically to supply all refugee shelters in Hamburg. And the good thing was that the city council and the mayor decided to kind of step out of the way, let us do our job and supply the people with the things that we collected. And
were you meeting hostility? Were people saying in Hamburg, what the heck's going on here? And all these people are changing our city?
I think in this time, not. I mean, at some point later, they were raising questions of what about our German homeless people? What about the German people that are in need? Why does everyone collect for refugees? And we just countered that from day one by also supplying homeless people and other people, because we knew that we have to look at this as a broader problem and find the right strategy to keep everyone involved and to supply as much people as we can, regardless of their heritage or origin.
Since Chancellor Merkel opened the door in Hamburg itself, how many refugees, asylum seekers have been settled?
I think in the last year there were 70,000 people coming to Hamburg. Hamburg has 1.8 million inhabitants, and 25,000 of them stayed because of the redistribution system of refugees all over Germany. And I think the numbers go down now a little bit, but it is still not easy to find housing, to find the right supply, to find health support, to find especially things like psychological counseling. These are issues that are very, very difficult to build up the structures for it. And this is still a work in progress between, of course, in the first place for the government and the city council, but still with a very active engagement of civic society. And this is a new tone that is set.
Philipp, if I could bring you in here. I was in Berlin at Tempelhof Airport some months back, and it was an extraordinary sight in these vast disused airport hangars, seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of refugees who had been temporarily settled in those airport hangars. Really a challenge of huge scale. At this point, how is that process going? And we all know that in Berlin, the Chancellor suffered a political setback just recently. Would you say there's a very powerful political reaction that set in against your efforts?
I think the situation was quite similar than Arndt just reported in Hamburg. I think there was a sense of community, a sense of support in the very beginning of the situation in the civil society. What we experienced from the public administration in our city was a very slow reaction to the needs of the people. So suddenly, may I quote, suddenly that was always something that people said, oh, suddenly the people are in our city, although it was a development that took place in the months before. So we had challenges actually in the provision of basic services to people right in the beginning. Some of you maybe saw that on TV or in newspapers that 10,000s of people were waiting in front of public administrative buildings to get registered, to get medical aid and support. So that was a major challenge. But at the same time, civil society stepped in, supported, and tried to do its best. And as you said, also the hangars of Tempelhof Airport are filled with people. But what we see currently that there's the Balkan route, as we call it, is closed. So the figures are going down. We are facing some kind of normalcy in the crisis, trying to adapt our systems to provide services to kids and their families in this facility. Still, there's hostility. No, there's not real hostility, but political parties are using the refugee crisis to mobilize their voters. And there's, as you said, last week there was an election in the state of Berlin, and we have 15% of the voters gave their vote to chauvinist, xenophobic parties, and that is a real
Alternative für Deutschland.
Yeah, Alternative für Deutschland. They are using that situation, and now it's very important that the state actors, that the parties and the democratic parties unite and really try to translate what Chancellor Merkel said into real policies that really, provide access to education, access to healthcare, access to further integration measures, integration to the job market, and also access, especially for young people, to schooling, which is, the most important thing, as we all know, for a proper integration into society. And
Have there been any bad incidents?
Sorry?
Have there been any bad incidents in Berlin of the kind that occurred in Cologne, or the attack with the axe on the train? These things, unfortunately, stick in people's imaginations often more than the remarkable achievement in having 1 million newcomers to Germany adapting to life in Germany.
As far as I know, these major incidents haven't taken place, but we have to be careful when there's a certain tension under the surface that among a lot of people that see now refugees are coming to our city, what's happening with us. So as Anne said, it's very important to also not just support refugees, but rethink our strategy towards social integration of bigger parts of the society. And if you go to different...
what do you mean by that, rethink it? In what way?
I mean, if we have a look at our expenditure on education and how well funded our schools in Berlin are, there are major challenges to integrate kids from not so well-off families into the education system. That is a major challenge, and education system faces the challenge of integration also without the current refugee crisis.
What do you think of David's suggestion that the whole job market in Europe is upside down? In the United States, you come here, you get a job, you adapt, you learn, and you have that framework of being part of working society. In Europe, with its more extensive welfare state, there's the idea, no, we've got to get these people first to adapt and prepare, and meanwhile, of course, they're still off on the side. So do you think that's a realistic policy target to change the job market in Europe to reflect that suggestion?
At least it's a challenge. What experts say, in the German system, people need up to 7 years to really earn money. And if we
7 years?
Yeah, so German classes, then proper vocational training, which usually takes 3 years. I mean, 7 years is maybe a high number of years, but some kids or youngsters are out of school for the last 3 years. I mean, they arrived into Germany, but they also have a history as a refugee and couldn't go to school maybe in Syria or outside Syria, for example. So there is they have to catch up to be properly integrated and serve also the needs of the German job market. And I think David is right in that. We need to give them opportunities to receive training and to receive schooling, but also to open the job market for people to earn.
Bring those 7 years down to a few months, maybe.
I mean, 7 years also will challenge that, but if we have to bring it down to integrate not only, but to integrate also through the job market and provide opportunities. And this is a challenge in Berlin. So we have high unemployment rates in the city. There's no industry. There's quite a reasons. You all might know it used to be an island, this city. So it will be hard to integrate refugees, but we need to open the market to make things more easy for also the recognition of expertise that people, got in Syria or elsewhere before they entered Germany. Yeah.
Keteva, what's it been like as a Syrian who's been arrested, tortured, seen friends of yours killed by the Syrian security services, so-called? When you tell people in the United States about your experience, do their eyes glaze over? Do they register what you're saying?
I think they do. I mean, part of this, I think, living what I lived through in Syria and being grown up here and coming here, I think the challenge was more is kind of being the messenger between people in Syria and people over here, explaining to people in the U.S. what is it like to live in Syria, raised up there under dictatorship, leaving Syria, going through all the trip. I mean, I traveled through Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, United Arab Emirates before I end up here. And then trying to explain to people also back home what does it mean to be here. Because also you have, on both sides you have people here getting their perspective from what they hear from media, but also people overseas getting their perspective of what have they've seen in the past maybe 15 years, and also they hear from the media over there. So, I think quite of the challenge was just being the bridge of explaining what it means on both sides. Surprisingly, even for me, I think people, were very responsive. I've been to many places around the country, talked in churches, schools, synagogues, all over. And even with the political alliance of, with the situation we have in the U.S., I've never actually encountered personally, after telling my story, anyone coming and telling me all the bad mouth.
Nobody said go home.
No. I think.
How do you explain more than 30 governors? That's a lot, saying they don't want any Syrians.
I think it's the fact that probably they haven't met any Syrian before.
Ignorance.
Yes. I think ignorance is mainly our problem. I mean, when people, especially coming and working first, when Syrian refugees got resettled here. I mean, the first time, when someone, so usually people, would exchange messages on WhatsApp or Facebook. It's like, oh, there's this family that got resettled last week. They need so and so and so. So I would get, literally, doubles of the amounts of, so, they would need, 2 mattresses. I'd get 20 mattresses. I'm everyone is just, sending what, whatever they have, or, whatever they can offer. But still, it's only the people who would come and say oh no, how would we know this is not terrorists? How would we trust those people? Did they used to clean themselves before coming here? All of these silly stuff. I think especially work with the Lutheran refugee services. I would get literally maybe 20 calls there, telling people about people saying oh how can we offer our help? How we can adopt the family, and then we'd get maybe a call every couple of days or so, someone saying yeah, exactly. Why are you getting those people?
What do you think would be the most effective way to get over that ignorance, to get Americans to realize the situation you come from and the huge contribution that people like you can make to American society? And America is about constant renewal and reinvention. That's what it's always been about, and you're part of that.
More importantly, also, it was America is the land actually for the people running away from religious or political persecution. America was built on being the heaven for those people running away. I think there are 2 levels for that. On a local level, in the resettlement process, we work a lot on telling refugees how things are here, but there's not really kind of any work on actually working on the community here to tell them what are those people like when they're coming from overseas. I've seen only actually two cities in the U.S. where actually resettlement agencies design kind of a booklet where refugees are being resettled. They go to those neighborhoods, they have community meetings, or they distribute those booklets around the neighborhood just to tell people actually those are what refugees are, the situation in their countries, their religion, everything, their social background. On another level, I think what we are missing is a lot of political will and political action, and actually political leadership for the people to come out and be supportive for for the refugee cause. Bobby always raised the example. We've seen, for example, President Obama bringing Obama a child who was sick with Ebola to the White House, hugging him. It's kind of a media campaign to show people no, this is something we need to deal with. But we haven't seen that. In the past 8 years, President Obama or First Lady Michelle hugging it a refugee child, or actually showing the human face of what refugees are. If we're missing, cities can do, and mayors have I think limited space of what they can do, but it takes a lot of political leadership, and it doesn't take a lot of effort, but it just takes the will to advocate for such a subject.
How worried are you? Donald Trump's son has used the image of a bowl of Skittles candy and said, the thing with you guys is you take a fistful of Skittles and they're going to be 2 or 3 bad ones. A very, very offensive image, which recalls some of the anti-Semitic propaganda in Germany, where we said, well, the thing about mushrooms, eating mushrooms, is you never know when there's going to be a bad mushroom. And there is a climate of this kind of hateful discourse that has infused the campaign of a serious contender, very serious contender, to occupy the Oval Office in the White House a few months from now. So, are you scared?
I would be lying if I said I'm not. I'm scared on 2 levels. This is an example of the bad leadership that we would want on such an issue. On another level, that would mean there would be a lot of work needed on the ground, really, to tell people about refugees and kind of to educate them about it. And we feel weird, in the time, really, especially focusing on Syria. After 5 years, people are getting more tired, whether you want to work on, helping people back, in the region, so that you at least have, so they would not have to leave the country and be refugees, or working with the refugees who are coming here more and more. We talk about, all the numbers of refugees we've been facing in 2014, 2015. But we're talking now about more than 12 million people displaced.
Yeah.
Those people are still in the region. They did not leave because they still have hope they can get back home. So imagine, by the years when those people are losing hope, we're going to be facing more numbers than what we've seen in the past 2 years.
Thank you. Anis, you've been extremely patient. You've done it. At the time of Hurricane Katrina and as mayor of Houston, you managed somehow to absorb a very large number of people from somewhere else very, very quickly. What are the key lessons of that? How did you do it? What are the elements that are required for this kind of successful, rapid integration of large numbers of people arriving from somewhere else?
Well, first let me say that while I was in local office in Houston, at that time it was my predecessor, Mayor Bill White, that was actually the point of the spear and managed most of that. But we had some distinct advantages. There were some 250,000 people who came from New Orleans and South Louisiana into the greater Houston area. But we viewed them as our cousins, our family, our neighbors. There were no language barriers, and there were cultural ties. In addition,
if that had not been the case, would it have been much more difficult?
I'm going to get there. In addition, there's a little bit of the there but for the grace of God. We are all, coastal communities understand natural disasters, we understand hurricanes, and so there was an expectation that you help your neighbor. But in the larger context, Texas takes in more refugees than any other state in America, and Houston takes in more of those than any other city in Texas. 1 in 4 Houstonians is foreign-born. The majority of Houstonians come from someplace else. So when you have a community of newcomers, it's much easier to integrate a new influx of folks. Because we are and have for decades been accommodating, again, people from all over the world, we have structures in place. But 250,000 people coming in a matter of a week or two can overwhelm anything. So you have to have the political will. The difference now is that, well, I'm going to back up. Cities are where ultimately refugees, migrants end up. And what's happening now in the United States is that at the federal and state level, it's a matter of politics. At the local level, it's a matter of people. And at the state level, they're viewed as problems to be housed and fed. At the local level, they're people who may have challenges, but they also have skills and assets. And we learned a long time ago to view them that way. Currently, I'm now out of office. I currently work for a local nonprofit, Neighborhood Centers, which came out of the settlement house movement. So we are in this space working on this issue. You have the initial response, which is you have to have a landing pad. And then you have the next tier response is how do you get them to, our mantra is earn, learn, and belong. Get them on the off ramp and get them out of earn, learn, and belong. Get them out of the off, get them onto an on ramp and into community. Both
so
with
earn first.
Earn first.
That gets back to the problem in Europe.
Particularly that sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, when you're
without earning, you can't get self-worth.
You can't get self-worth, and you also can't really integrate back into community. The other thing we know is that you can concentrate people together. You have to build a support network, but you don't want to concentrate a community of immigrants or refugees in one place and isolate them. You've got to get them, again, onto the on-ramp into the community and embedded in the community so that whether they are assimilated, they are or not, they are integrated.
This sounds like the exact opposite of the European approach.
And part of that is the structure of our community. Houston being in Texas, we've been dealing with immigrants across our southern border. A significant number of Houstonians are immigrants from south of the border, documented or not. And we
Mr.
have.
Trump wants to stop that.
Hey, good luck. Not going to happen. So we have accommodated. But if you think about it, the United States, after Vietnam, and I'm intimately familiar with what happened after the fall of Vietnam, when we brought in, I don't know, 170, 200,000 Vietnamese. My family was a host family. There was a national consensus. We felt a sense of national shame. But how did it happen? It happened in small groups through churches across America, and very quickly getting them spread across the country and into community. It's the personal connection. We have a fundamentally different system of getting people into the workforce, and I think mayors across the country are stepping up over and over again and saying, we'll take refugees, we'll take immigrants. We understand what the issues are. We would like to have the resource help, but in cities we don't just step over people. We give them a handout and a hand up and try to work with them.
I'm going to throw this open shortly, so if you have a question, do prepare it, please. And I saw you shaking your head a little bit on the America has it right, Europe has it wrong front. What was that shaking of your head about?
If we would be in a laboratory, that might be right, but we have this very, very fragile situation where it is maybe not wise just to crush traditions and to say, now we have a new solution. We have to see how we can connect a new development with the old traditions. That means regarding the vocational training system in Germany, which is established over maybe even thousands of years. So there is a huge understanding of this is working properly. So we wouldn't do any good to the refugees if we would just throw it away and say, okay, now we take off all barriers to get into jobs. I think the smarter thing in this regard would be to flexibilize it in that way that you can do part-time vocational training, for example, and go on with integration courses, language classes on the other half of the day. So just to make some kind of agreements.
Can that be done on the local level, or does it require national legislation?
Right now, there's a program running that's kind of a pilot program that tries it. It will start actually in Hamburg in the next few months, and this is there has to be some funding from the federal level, but it has to be instituted and tried as a pilot project on the local level. So it is also in this regard very important that cities step up and say, we have a conclusion, we could bring it up to the federal level and try to find some department that tries to fund this kind of project and then scale it when it works out. So I think we have to have more flexible approaches, but it is it wouldn't favor the refugees in the long run just to create always an extra situation for them, because we also have this discussion about why there are always other circumstances for refugees. We have to deal with that. We have to address that in the right way.
What about Philip, the path to citizenship, that relatively rapid path to citizenship that David also mentioned as a motivating factor?
I think rapid access to citizenship without having chances to actually integrate in the first place wouldn't change the scene, I guess. So I would support what also.
But I think his idea was that it's a spur to integrate. If you have that objective, that possibility, which is very distant in Europe, do you buy that?
I would buy that. I think a hard case related to that discussion. It's not a long time ago that we actually changed our citizenship law so that after a period of time you can also apply for citizenship without being the son or the daughter of a German parent. So that's quite a new concept to us. But still, it's important that we create pathways for integration before, granting citizenship, so that people have a real chance. And I think that's the challenge. We are politicians, and a lot of people are talking that integration starts with education, but we need to support daily policies on state level, on the various levels of education administration, to really provide schools with funds and means to cater for the needs that the people have today. So that's the whole discussion about, how can we actually turn human rights on one hand into national policies, but then into policies that also matter for people on the ground. So every child, regardless of nationality and whatever, has the right to access education helping people. We are just giving them access to their rights. And we need to have ways now in our country, in the city administration and also on state level, that really enables people that are working on the forefront to integrate, to support that, and also give the people, the refugees, a chance to actually get access and perform and do their very best and get what they entitled to.
Okay, thank you. Who has a question? One at the back there. Please identify yourself if you would.
Yes. Hi, my name is Anu Shah. I'm a tech refugee. We're focused on bringing technology, using technology to enable and empower refugees. I work for a nonprofit. And my question is about if you can please comment on the process of matching refugees to their host cities and what factors are considered when matching refugees to the countries and the cities within the countries.
So matching refugees to cities. Anise, what would you say about that?
Well, clearly it's fundamentally different here than in Europe, but in general, you want to have a willing partner at the other end, but we also, depending on the size of the population, we want to be able to match families and to make sure that there is a culturally appropriate support network, if at all possible. Houston has as I said, we have a vast refugee community, but for example, we have a significant Bhutanese population, a very small, distinct language group, and an area where instead of kind of dispersing them across the city, we actually help them settle more closely together because of the extreme cultural dislocation they experience. So it's all context specific.
I'm not sure that happens at all in Europe. I mean, you can be a refugee in Sweden from Damascus and suddenly find yourself at the Arctic Circle in far northern Sweden for no apparent reason.
Somalis to Minnesota here. So.
Yeah. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just to add on that. I mean, part of the process when refugees apply for what's called the blue card, in the frontline countries, which is the resettlement process. So when they apply, they're being asked, for example, let's say it's decided they would like the states would take this family, depending on the case, usually like urgent medical case or single moms. So they are asked if they know anyone in the like in the states, like a close family or a close friend. And that's if they prefer to be resettled like in the same city. So usually families, get the choice if they know anyone that they trust, like kind of like a community they want to be close to, and they are being resettled there. That's usually 70% of the cases. The 30% left, it's left kind of like to the resettlement agency, depending on where they have, like their office is really, can deal with this case, knows background about their language, their culture, and everything. And there is a community in the city where they serve, which can support this family.
What about if you say, I'm a tech genius, I want to go to Palo Alto?
I mean, if that's their choice, then I think, yeah.
There has to be
is that taken?
there has to be a sponsoring organization now.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Question. Yes, ma'am, at the back there, please.
Hi, Jessica Thurkelson with Asylum Access, and I wanted to thank all of you for your leadership on this particular issue. I think it's absolutely true that this may not be rocket science, but it requires an immense amount of political leadership and bravery. Asylum Access works in a lot of urban centers in Africa, Asia, Latin America. And I'm wondering if you have considered or have been working on any city-to-city partnerships that might help to expand these approaches in cities like Dar es Salaam, Bangkok, and other major urban centers.
So city-to-city cooperation, yes.
Actually, right now, I'm a member of a so-called transatlantic core group, which was established by several foundations.
Sorry, what was the name?
Transatlantic core group.
Yeah.
Was established by several foundations from the United States. From Germany, it's the BMW Foundation, Bosch Foundation, and the Atlantic Council, and Council on Foreign Affairs. And we are actually right now working on a pilot project to bring practitioners and integration experts from the cities of Hamburg and Chicago together. I mean, this is just the first step, just to try how could it work out, and to bring them together not just once, but to kind of open a constant dialogue between those experts to really learn from each other and to create some output from learning from each other, not just like the next meeting of people from the one side of the pond with the others, just to produce some results. And there are several other initiatives that really try to establish this knowledge transfer on a transnational level and between cities. But I think what you mentioned is very important to broaden the scope to other scenes like the European and the American scene, to really broaden it to the global scale and to think how we can learn from solutions in other countries that might be very creative and might be very good for us, but we always have our Western focus, so maybe we should refocus in this regard.
I saw a question over there, I think, and at the back.
Thank you. I'm Isa Lertes from Refugees International. So my question is about a sort of far more negative response that we've seen in Europe since the beginning of the crisis. There have been instances of hate crimes, attacks on reception centers, on asylum seekers and refugees. So I was wondering in Germany if that's still a concern and how, obviously it's a matter for the criminal justice system, but also, your cities have addressed this issue. Thanks.
I think it's still a matter. We shouldn't underestimate, let's say, hatred and hate crimes that might not pop up at the moment, but they are popping up, especially in certain areas of Eastern Germany quite frequently. It has been a problem not only since the current refugee crisis, but it's an endemic problem that we have. It's what we see now. They are persecuted, but still, there's what we see under the surface. There's a lot of negative energy towards refugees that pops up from time to time with incidents like attacks on refugee shelters, etc. But also, and we shouldn't underestimate the facts of the latter, is discrimination in public administration, but also on the working place, where people from other regions of the world are not treated equally. So it's crimes and this kind of incidents, but also discrimination in the normal life that people from other parts of the world face also in our countries. And of course what we see in Germany is a decreasing empathy towards refugees. I mean, in the beginning everybody was really welcoming, that a lot of civil society activists, corporate partners, government agencies were ready to help. But what we have to face is that this is fading away. We have elections going on various levels of government in Germany, and this will be a major challenge. I'm a little concerned how it's going, how it will progress. But we as civil society actors and also as citizens have to stand up and really see this as a challenge and oppose these movements and stop them right from the beginning.
Table, when a bomb goes off in New York City and a man is arrested who's a naturalized Afghan and a Muslim, does your heart sink?
I mean, it's hard really to live, like the situation. I was explaining to Bobby the other day, I was at the workshop about countering violence extremism, and there was this research about people who join jihadist movement. So I was just sitting, looking at research and making just check marks, okay, match this, match this. Every time it happens, I'm I get the feeling, should I leave or or not? It's should
I leave?
Yes, yeah. It's how safe would it? I mean, even I think about it for a moment. For me, it's not only about only what the public perception is, but also part of it how the government deals with it. So I mean, for example, being a Syrian comes from a very sensitive community, dealing with the police. I mean, especially me being arrested and tortured by the intelligence. So for me, every time I encounter a police, authority. Authority is my feeling is what is the next step. So especially being under suspicion when when dealing with authorities, it's kind of bringing the trauma that, what we were living on, in Syria when encountering police.
Last question at the back there, the gentleman.
Thank you. My name's David Baines, and I'm working with Qatar Foundation International on an inclusive education project for refugees. But I'm interested to know how different cities have responded to the statistic that shows that something like 1 in 10 refugees has a disability or special need upon arrival, and how you accommodate those needs, particularly thinking about accommodation, education, employment, and so on.
Question about accommodating people with special needs.
Not well.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, there are now some efforts. I can just speak for Hamburg in this regard. There are some efforts made. We have a kind of gathering. We call it forum from people from civic society, from government and business that tackle different issues of integration. And there's a special forum for the question how to make the situation better for people with disabilities. We, as an organization, are, for example, in contact with all players in that field, that we provide things like crutches and stuff that we arrange to get donated and we bring to those people. And but this is just a very basic covering, and it's not just a very forward-looking. I mean, they are definitely a group of people that are kind of left behind right now because it is so much other things that have to be addressed. Yeah.
Just to add one point there, I mean, assessments actually show that, just found the figures, that 82% of every refugee, especially from Syria, that enters the country has physical injury. 33% have mental disorders that are quite easily to be detected by doctors on the ground. And 42% are not vaccinated. And especially when we have a look not only on disability, but on health in general, we are fighting for that also refugees get universal access to our healthcare system. And that's not the case currently in Germany. So it's very hard, especially for disabled children or people, unless an NGO takes care, to actually get the right treatment. You have to apply in front of Social Security agency to actually be allowed to see a doctor. So it's, I don't want to exaggerate the case, but still there is a lot of, we have to do a lot of to actually grant access also to our health system, and that's not only about physical impairments or injury, but also about mental issues that we are facing. Many people or many children and parents and families are traumatized, are facing maybe re-traumatization in shelters. So that's a big issue, and that's an issue if we don't talk about that, if we don't change something there, we'll have a lot of trouble going on in the next years to come if we don't take care properly.
It also takes you into the backlash, because there's at least here in America, we don't do an adequate job in general in those areas. And then if you particularly favor refugees, then it becomes, well, they're jumping the line. And that community support begins to evaporate. So it's a delicate balancing act.
Thank you all very much. A lot of work to be done in a lot of areas. Thank you. Thank you.